Hi, everybody, and welcome to Traders Report today by Mathew Dixon on 3.0 TV. So we're going to begin first of all by looking at US oil. Why US oil? Because of course we've had the strikes by US on Iranian nuclear sites over the weekend. This caused a massive sell-off in the crypto markets. We saw basically 240 traders liquidated over the weekend. We've seen the market cap of crypto fall by 6.2%. This is, really, really important. It was somewhat expected, though. We were in a corrective mode to the downside. We can actually see that on the oil price here. So we had basically a long-term impulsive move to the upside here. This is quite long-term. And we've been correcting to the downside. And when I say correcting, we can actually see from this high point here, we basically see lower lows and lower highs. So here is a lower low, here is a lower high, and a lower low was struck. Now, since the conflagrations in the Middle East, particularly between Iran and Israel, we've seen the oil price spiking higher. We may or may not have finished that. I'm just going to focus on a slightly shorter term here to try to see where we're at. But basically, we appear to be in some sort of downtrend on oil, and we haven't yet broken that. So if I just move over to the daily, this is the weekly chart. If I move over to the daily chart here, we can actually see that we have a couple of hidden bearish divergences. Now, these are really important predictive signals. They're quite accurate, among the most accurate of signals. No signal of its own is absolutely accurate, but they give us indications of where the market's likely to go. So we've had here basically lower highs in price and corresponding higher highs in RSI peaks. And that basically tells you of hidden bearish divergence. So what that did, that was between the peak here and the peak here, that actually told you there's going to be a continuation of downside move. And that's precisely what happened. Now, what's really interesting is we actually see another hidden bearish divergence, which actually came into play last night when the oil price just peaked there. So again, we see lower highs in price, and again, slightly higher highs in RSI, corresponding RSI. These have to line up perfectly, and we've done that. So this is a valid signal. So it tells us, it's slightly early days to conclude, but it tells us potentially now we have this hidden bearish divergence in place. So potentially downside to come in the oil price. Now that would tell you that there's going to be some sort of respite in the hostilities in the Iran-Israel conflict. So maybe Iran will come to the table for talks on their nuclear ambitions. Maybe America's pushed them to do that. I don't know. But it looks as though there's a reasonable possibility we're going to see some downside now on oil. Now, that would be a good sign for risk assets, including cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and the rest of them, of course, because it means the cost of doing business is less. If the oil price comes down, it means there's basically less pressure on prices, less pressure on inflation. Cost of business is much less. The cost of transport is much less. This is really good. It's a good economic sign. So basically, if this, we need to watch this daily candle here, the one that's showing red at the moment. If this finishes as a red candle, then we do have some sort of confirmation that this hidden bearish divergence is actually in play, and we should see more downside on oil. And as I say, that's potentially a very good sign for cryptocurrency. So tentatively, I would say that we're just about to get a reversal. So despite those sharp sell-offs we've seen over the weekend in the crypto prices, and we saw Bitcoin, of course, dip to quite a bit lower, around 98,000 level. We saw it dip to overnight. But overall, this again looks corrective in the price of cryptocurrency here to the from sideways from the previous high here, and then we had an all-time high here. But basically, we're seeing corrective movement, choppy movement to the downside. That tells us that the direction of the impulse here, you can see it's to the upside. There's no overlap in these waves. It's upside. But here, there's a lot of overlap. So, for example, the movement up here overlaps this movement down here. That tells us this is a correction. It told us there's more upside to come. And if we were to look, we won't go into it on every chart, but today, if we were to look, we would see there's some hidden bullish divergence, hidden or regular. So certainly some bullish divergence showing upside potential from here. That's precisely what we saw. So again, we see some impulsive movements to the upside and then corrective downward movement. Again, we're seeing a lot of overlap in these waves. This is a typical ABC correction, and I'm just going to open this one out, go down to the 4 hour time frame now, and just open that out a little bit so that you can see that again, we have very, very corrective movement. So the movement down here and down here was all overlapped. So this movement here overlapped this movement down here and so on. Even the movement up here since the lows last night has overlapped this movement down here. This is very typical corrective move. It's what's probably called in Elliott wave terms a WXY correction. That's a 3-3-3 correction. And that is a corrective set of waves in Elliott wave terms, and it tells you that we're likely to push to the upside. And you can see with these green candles how strongly we are pushing towards the upside. And I'm hoping and expecting this will continue to bring us to new all-time highs for Bitcoin. From 98,000, we've already risen 4% overnight from 98, I think it was, to 102,000 right now, moving very, very sharply to the upside. And I'm expecting that should probably continue in impulsive mode to take us to new all-time highs for Bitcoin. It's looking really promising, to be honest. If I move over to Ethereum very briefly, again, we can see a very corrective move to the downside in the form of an ABC. That's actually a 5-3-5, which is what's called a zigzag correction in Elliott wave terms. So although it's a different type of correction, it's still a correction. So we did expect, following this choppy movement here, we expected to push higher, which is what we saw. We actually, again, here had some regular bearish divergence. So long term, this one was showing hidden bearish. Shorter term, we had some regular bearish divergence, telling you of a downside move. Precisely what happened. Just shows how powerful these signals can be. And now we have a completed, I believe, ABC correction to the downside. And we're moving again sharply to the upside for Ethereum. This should really be, it should really be very, very positive for cryptocurrency. We're seeing a lot of positive European regulation, actually even more positive. We're seeing some really good crypto flows now in Europe as opposed to America because of the positivity in the regulation now in Europe. So this is actually a really positive sign. I think we're going to be heading towards what, we may be just entering into crypto spring at the moment, ready to, pushing towards crypto summer, and a nice good bull run is in the offing, I think, for cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin and Ethereum both showing positive moves. Same with Litecoin, but I'll skip over that and go to one of my favorites, which is Solana. I say one of my favorites. It's the chain of choice, I think, amongst retail. It's certainly the one where all the memes are situated. And yeah, it's got some great metrics. It's had some great upgrades, which I think should start to shine through now. And we see once again a very clear, I think it's a WXY correction. So again, it would be a 3-3. So we've got A, B, C for a 3. And then we've got 3 waves to the upside for X and then 3 waves for Y. So I think it's a completed WXY correction. So we're pushing really positively towards the upside. And whilst we broke through that support, long-held support, I did have a buy zone all the way down to 126. We did actually touch 126 and change last night. So that was perfect, really. If you looked at my X feed at MD Trade, you'll see I predicted that some time ago that we could dip to that 126 area. And that's exactly what happened overnight. And now we're pushing sharply to the upside. So I think there's real potential for Ethereum to, sorry, not Ethereum, for Solana potentially to push to new all-time highs. The previous all-time high was, of course, $295. And we pushed very sharply down. And I think we could push now back towards that 295. We'll monitor it along the way. We'll monitor the wave count and see whether we're going to make all that way to 295. But for now, things are looking really bullish and positive. So I'm really hopeful there. Looking at a lot of other cryptos as well, we see positivity. But I'll just skip over finally, I think, to the SPX, the S&P 500. So longer term, we did have a move down from the previous all-time high here. That's indicated here by this dotted line. Potentially, we do that could actually turn out to be a double top. But at the moment, we've had a really strong move up to the upside. We are in a corrective mode at the moment, and that could be a couple of potential formations, but I've got it labeled at the moment as what's called a triangle formation. The triangle is basically a corrective consolidation phase or formation here in this area here. I've got it labeled as A, B, C, D, E. Now, the E wave is the only one that's allowed to undershoot or overshoot by a small amount the trend line here, and it just looks as though undershot slightly, and now we're pushing sharply to the upside. So I do think that the S&P 500 is also now in bullish mode. We should break out of this triangle, but a triangle is what's known as a pre-terminal wave in its particular cycle. So pre-terminal means that this thrust from the triangle, which should thrust sharply higher, would be what's called a terminal wave in this cycle. So there's real potential for there to be a double top, I believe, in the S&P 500. So this push up still has some way to go, I think, but we need to watch the wave counts and watch the indicators as we approach the previous all-time high for potential double tops. We won't call it just yet. We'll watch out on the wave counts. We'll watch out on the indicators. But that's the potential. But right now, I'm bullish, and I've been buying the dips. I've been advocating buying dips in most of the cryptocurrencies, S&P 500, and lots of the assets. I think we're looking for a positive day. So that's it for today. That's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I really hope that's been helpful, and look forward to catching up with you again later in the week.